Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we got quite a few things to talk about. I want to start off with what happened over the last 2 days in Catalunya. On stage 2 it was the expected sprint finish, which was won by Michael Matthews, who won in front of Valverde, Impi and Max Schachmann. And I want to point out especially Schachmann, because with 2 kilometers to go he once again attacked, was reeled in, and still was strong enough to finish a respectable 4th place, which shows that he's in really good form. Really interesting rider. I said it in a previous video that I'm excited to see what he can do this year for Bora Hansgrohe as a team captain in certain races where Peter Sagan is not present, and even in some races where he is present, like for instance the Ardennes. Peter Sagan said that this season he wants to try and do the Ardennes seriously. He especially for that reason started his season late, because he wanted to keep a good form until Liège-Bastogne-Liège. But I think now with Schachmann they actually have a 1-2 punch for those races, because they can wait for a sprint finish, especially Liège, now with a flat finish for Sagan, but they can also send Schachmann up the road, like also often De Koning does it. Last year we saw it with Bob Jungels, who actually won the race, because he had Alaphilippe in the group behind. So other teams did not want to bring Alaphilippe to the line, but yeah, that is why Jungels stayed away. And maybe this season Max Schachmann can stay away. But nonetheless, really great race by, or great sprint by Michael Matthews. The other day he was beaten by Gregor Bole on the sprint, or in the sprint for 3rd place, but now he won quite comfortably. Valverde never stood a chance, but he took a few bonus seconds, which I thought could be important, but turned out on stage 3, the mountain top finish on Falta 2000, Valverde was actually not in contention. He was dropped quite badly. He lost 2 minutes and 20 seconds on the eventual winner, Adam Yates. And well, not only is Valverde out of contention, also Chris Froome is out of contention, because he crashed on stage 2, so the day before, and he actually finished inside the gruppetto on the mountaintop finish. Another rider who had a bad day was Richie Porte. He lost 7 minutes. And then the one who lost, well, the fewest amount but still had a bad day was Enric Mas. I talked about him before. He lost a little bit over a minute, so he was the worst of the favorites who lost about a minute. But with him it has to be said that it was only, or is only, his 2nd outing of the season. He raced Algarve in February, and now at the end of March, so exactly a month later, he is racing Catalunya, while most other riders who finished inside the top 10, Mas was 13th, so just out of the top 10. Most of the riders who finished inside the top 10 have already 2, some even 3 stage races finished, so they have 1 or 2 complete stage races, so up to 10 more race days than Enric Mas. So it was kind of expected that he would be behind those guys form-wise. I hope that he will be better in July. He started his season very slow, this time around, and maybe he will be rewarded, because it is not really necessary to finish on the podium or whatnot in March if you want to get a great result in July. It's nice to have, but if we take a look at, for example, Nibali or even Chris Froome over the last few years, those guys, they most of the time in those March stage races, April stage races, they finish around 15th to 25th place, and no one cares, because everyone knows, okay, those guys take that as preparation, as training rides. They will be ready come May, July, depending if they target the Giro d'Italia or the Tour de France. But yeah, back to the actual winner. Yates won today because, it has to be said, Bernal and Quintana attacked multiple times, but Quintana was unwilling or maybe unable to work, so it was down to Bernal to work, and he was not strong enough to keep Yates away. Dan Martin was also strong. He closed the gap, and it was a 4 or 5 man sprint with Miguel Angel Lopez, who finished 2 seconds behind the other guys. It was Yates in front of Bernal. Then Dan Martin and Quintana actually finished 4th, so even off the podium. So maybe he just couldn't work today. Probably because Valverde was the designated leader actually for this race, and then he cracked today, had a bad day, and well, now it is really very hard for Movistar to actually pull this off to win the race. But in the overall classification, if I have to check now, De Gent actually kept his race lead with 27 seconds over Yates and 30 seconds over Bernal, a few more for Dan Martin and Quintana, about 33 or 35 if I remember correctly. But yeah, that is the amount of time he still has left after the mountaintop finish. So great ride by Thomas De Gent, who was able to defend his jersey. I said it in a previous video that I think he had good chances to survive this stage, and he did. I said he's not the worst climber, and great result by him for a stage like that. And now he just has to hope that Yates does not take too many bonus seconds. It was good for him that Valverde cracked, because Valverde would be someone who can actually sprint and get those bonus seconds. He took bonus seconds on the first stage, he was second in the sprint on the second stage. Well, and then now today he faded, which is really good for Thomas De Gent, for his hopes to keep the overall, because Valverde is probably the best sprinter on those lumpy stages. And now De Gent almost does not have to fear him. Can he keep it all the way? Well, it's not over the race, but some people thought he would lose the jersey today already, which he did not. And he lives to fight another day. So actually exciting days ahead in Catalunya, which was not something we expected before the race started, but we're surely glad that it turned out that way, and all of that because Thomas De Gent attacked on the first stage and nobody was able to reel him in. Then we also had another cobbled classic today, which was the 3 Days of De Panne. And yes, funny name if it is a one-day race, because over the years they shortened the race. This year it has actually become a World Tour race. and it was won quite comfortably by Dylan Groenewegen in front of Fernando Gaviria and Elia Viviani. He beat those two easily. He came from behind and he was so strong, so strong. He looked like he was in another league. As if he was toying with those two. And we talk about Gaviria and Viviani as two of the best sprinters that we have right now in the peloton. And Groenewegen was just so much better on this day, which is actually concerning. Well, he is basically the next Kittel because he can't get over hills, but when it's flat, he is really dangerous, a really dangerous guy. There is almost nobody who can beat him if he's correctly positioned, which also does not happen all too often. Even today he was boxed in once again, but still had the legs to finish it off. Came late and easily sprinted past them. But those are the two problems with the Dutchman. That first of all, he does not get over hills all too often. And the second is, and that is even worse, his bad positioning. Well, he is in a team where he does not have a designated lead out, but also if his positioning is that bad, he loses a lot of stages where he is actually the strongest, which is a shame because he could win so much more, so many races if he was able to get in the right position. There are guys like Sagan who often in sprints just knows which wheel to pick. Or we saw it at the last Giro d'Italia, Sam Bennett is really good at that. So basically all the Bora sprinters, they're really good at picking the right wheel to follow, surfing wheels, and then just out-sprint. But Groenewegen, he is basically every second race he is boxed in and has to fight from a bad position, from a bad starting position, and well, it's hard to win races even if you are the strongest when you start in not the most comfortable position. But yeah, there are many more cobbled races ahead. Just 2 days from now we have E3, which was actually one of the best one-day races of the past few seasons. Then another 2 days later, on the 31st of March, we have Gent-Wevelgem, which is basically a sprinters race. There was, I think 2 years ago, was a really great addition with a lot of crosswinds, but most of the time it just comes down to a reduced sprint. Last year we had Sagan, who won in front of Viviani, who wants revenge for that race. But then we also have the Dwars of Vlaanderen on the 3rd of April. We have the first cobbled monument, the Tour of Flanders on the 7th. We have the Scheldeprijs on the 10th, and finally Paris-Roubaix on the 14th. So basically every 2 to 3 days now there is a cobbled race on the calendar. My favorite time of the year. I really love those races. Those are races for the hard man, and I can't wait to see more of them. This is just amazing. Like, I grew up watching Tom Bonen ride over the cobbles and his great rivalry with Cancellara. It was amazing to see, and because I grew up with those legendary riders when they were in their prime, those races are still very dear to me. And every year I am excited when late March comes and we have the opening weekend, and then come April, when there's finally those two monuments, which are always great racing, no matter how it turns out. It is often unpredictable because of crashes, mechanicals, weather, such interesting races, because even though there are favorites, but over the past few years, like, when has the big favorite ever won those races? Like, Terpstra was certainly not a favorite. Gilbert was not a favorite. We have Matt Heyman was not a favorite to win the race. Okay, Sagan was a favorite last year. But yeah, Roubaix over the past few years was often won by riders who, okay, you thought, well, not a bad rider, but not quite the top favorite. And probably once again it will be a very hard fought race. And finally, I have to bring you the sad news of the day, which is that the Vuelta San Juan King of the Mountains, the 32-year-old Argentinian Daniel Zamora, was found guilty of doping. He had EPO in his blood at the race, and he finished 12th overall. And that makes you wonder if the guy who does not even finish inside the top 10 is using EPO. What are the other 11 guys taking? I don't want to accuse anybody, but I think it would be foolish to assume that the World Tour riders and the European scene, that they are riding clean, that only a few South Americans are using doping. But, well, the World Tour teams have better doctors, more money for better lawyers, even if they are caught, all that stuff, which makes it really hard to convict them. And we shall have to see. Doping is still a big concern of this sport, but I am happy that at least there are controls, there are tests, like they use blood tests and stuff like that to at least try to get the sport clean. If we take a look at other sports, like, for example, soccer or football, whatever you want to call it, or tennis, where they basically don't even check for anything, and, well, if you don't check, you can't find anybody. So cycling is at least trying to catch those guys who are doping, and that has to be considered as a positive thing, even when we have our few cases every year, especially before the big races. Like, you just know that every start of July the UCI will give out a few positive tests. Funny that again, but every year it is the same. They open their drawer and to get in the news again. But at least they are trying, at least they are doing something. while other sports just watch and don't do anything. So with that, just like Daniel Zamora for the next few years, I'm out.